Okay, today we are talking about the Laowa 65mm macro lens for Fujifilm. This is a tiny little lens that is super sharp, lightweight, and just a joy to use. I'm going to go through the pros and the cons of this lens. Here's why I picked this lens up. I think this would be a great beginner lens for macro photography if you have Fujifilm. They definitely make this for other brands, and I'll put links for those down below. But this one here is for the X mount for Fujifilm. I'm going to put some specs for this lens up on the screen. One of the nice things that I really like about this lens is all of the markings that it has on here. It makes it really easy. So let's go through the pros of this lens. This lens has got a really nice clickable aperture, right? It's nice and firm. You can feel the clicks and it stays in place. This is going to be important, and I'll explain that in just a few minutes, why this is really useful to have this. The throw is really nice for focusing, which goes all the way from 2:1 all the way to infinity. It stops here. So this gives you the ability to focus, and it shows you here in feet and meters the distance. So you can really easily get in the zone that you want to be in for macro focusing. You can also use this lens as a portrait lens, although there are some reasons you probably would prefer to use something other than this, and I'll go through that. The lens is all metal and glass. It comes with a metal lens hood, which is okay. It's a little bit difficult to get it on and screw it on. It also doesn't store well going back on here very easily. I find it just interferes with the focus ring here, so I don't use the lens hood. I'd take it with me if I thought I would need it, but honestly I don't. The other thing that I really like about this is it's got 2x magnification if you want to get up close shots, and it's got a really nice pleasing bokeh. I really like that. So here's what it looks like. Now here's where the cons come in. There's no metal contacts on here at all, so there's no electronics with this. It's a complete manual lens. Make sure that you have your camera set to shoot without a lens, or your manual lens won't work. Your camera doesn't have any EXIF data about the image that's taken with this lens. You're going to end up with not getting an aperture reading on your back of your camera or in the data for the photos that you take. You're going to get an aperture of f0 that shows up on your screen. You're going to have to rely on using this aperture dial and counting those clicks in your head as you're going through, because you're not going to get any feedback on the screen about where your aperture is set without having to look back down at the lens to see where it is. There's no locking of it, so it will move if you accidentally bump it, so you really need to be careful and be checking this. It doesn't have any image stabilization either. That's the biggest drawback, is there's no aperture information. Now, of course, the shutter speed does get recorded, but there's going to be something that you need to do with any X camera that you've got. You will need to make sure that it is set in manual mode, right? You're going to want to make sure that it's in manual mode. And if you have like the XS20 or XH2S or one of those cameras, XH2, you'll have to set that manual. The reason why you have to do that is you're going to need to use the focus assist. Let's go ahead and put this on here and I'll show you exactly what I mean. It's not weather sealed either, so that is another negative if you're looking for a weather sealed lens, which this 80mm macro lens is weather sealed. Although this is a third of the price of new 80mm macro. So just keep that in mind if you're a beginner and are just wanting to experiment with macro. We're going to come down and we're going to go to MF Assist, right? You're going to want to have that, and you're going to want to have focus peak highlight on, and you can choose what color you want. I've got red high as what I'm using on here. That seems to work really well when I'm out in the garden, and I'll show you some photos and some examples of that in just a minute. You'll get to see how that works. That is really important. The other important thing that you're going to want to do is up in image quality here, mount adapter setting. You're going to want to actually put in what your millimeters are for the focal length of this lens. So 65 millimeters. You just go in here and you save that, and then you edit the lens name and you can give it a name. I put Laowa 65mm on mine. The reason that you want to do that is in your software, when you bring in your images, you're going to want to have some identification in there. At least it'll tell you that it's a 65mm, and it will, in Capture One, you can actually see where it puts the name of the lens, like Laowa 65mm. So when I'm sorting in Capture One and filtering for all the images that I took with this camera and this lens, I am able to find it. I won't be able to search for aperture because that is not recorded. That in Capture One shows up as F1. So it just says F/1. The way that you're going to focus is you're going to just rotate this until you get your item in focus. And with the focus peaking, it'll be really easy to see. And if you can't, then maybe try a different focus peaking color, depending on what color the composition is. Pick a color that actually will contrast well so that you can see that. The other thing that you need to do is turn on IBIS if it's handheld, if you're using it handheld. And that's where setting that focal length of 65mm is really important in the camera, because it does help with the IBIS. And since this lens doesn't have IBIS, you're going to use the in-body image stabilization of your camera if it has one. My X-T5 does, so this combination works better than if I had no IBIS at all when I'm doing handheld. I have to say though that trying to do handheld with a 2:1 magnification is really difficult. The slightest movement of your hand will definitely shift the focal plane, especially if you're shooting wide open here, which I'll get to that in a minute, and we'll just talk about why you would probably want to stop the lens down a little bit. I'll show you some examples. The plane of focus is extremely narrow at 2.8, especially when you're shooting things very close up. It's like razor thin, and you can actually see it with the focus peaking, how that looks. So stopping your lens down will broaden out that depth of field a little bit more so that you can get more of that in focus. That would be probably the best thing to do. The ideal thing to do would be to use this with a tripod if you're doing any close-up macro shots where anything is moving. If you're trying to photograph honeybees, which I've been trying to do, they're out. All my broccolini has started blooming, so it went to flower, and I just left them for the bees to enjoy, and they are all out there all day just hitting all the little flowers. So you can see it's challenging to get them in focus and to hold that focus long enough before they move. And just the slightest movement that they have will move them out of the plane of focus. Some of the things that I have tried to do with this that has helped is to use a flash and play around with my manual flash settings to get something that works for the environment that I am shooting in. So yeah, use a flash so that you can keep your shutter speed up high and freeze that motion. That will help. But getting that plane of focus is going to even be more important. So getting the aperture up to f11, f16, somewhere in that area, between f8 and f11 and f16, somewhere in that area. Keep it stop down, use a flash, Try to capture as much in focus as possible. There are other ways to do it, which I'm going to do in a subsequent video, which is going to be about focus stacking and focus merging. So that would be something I would probably use the 80mm for, but I have a couple of ideas about how I could use even this 2:1 macro lens that it's completely manual, and maybe do manual focus stacking. I'm going to try that out and see. When I do that video, I'll do both the 80mm macro and the 65mm manual macro lens, and we can test that out and see what the results are like. I think this lens is great. I didn't think that I was going to enjoy shooting with manual focus as much as I did. I find it very easy. I was outside, and you can see as the pictures that I'm showing you, you can see how easy it is to just gently just turn the focus ring, using the focus peaking. Immediately I see exactly what's in focus. Now, one thing, if you are trying to focus for portraits, it's going to be more difficult to try to make sure you get somebody's eye in focus, because that focus peaking is just not that definitive. It's very hard to tell. So I don't think this would be an ideal portrait lens to use, but I definitely think it's amazing to do macro photography. You take a look at the shots that I've gotten with this. All right, so real quick, let's just go through some of these photos that I took with the Laowa 65mm lens. Start off with this coneflower that I took outside in the garden, and I shot this at ISO 1600 1/2000, and the aperture says f1 because, as I mentioned, it doesn't capture the aperture. It says 65mm because that is what I put in the camera setting that I showed you. If I zoom in a little bit here, you can definitely see it's nice and sharp. I did this with the manual focus, and I think that turned out pretty good. This one here, I'm amazed that it came in focus as much as it did, because I was shooting at a 60th of a second at ISO 125, and I checked it in Affinity 2 and it says aperture f0, so it'll say either 1 or 0 most likely in whatever software you are using. But I was really surprised how nice this came. I'm assuming my aperture was probably really wide open, maybe 2.8 or 4, because the background is really, really blurred out, and I've got a really nice separation. And if I zoom in, you can see that the bee, and they are hard to get in focus, was fairly in focus. I would say it's not really ideal, because if I wanted to print out a close-up of the bee, this would not be in focus. But from far away, it definitely looks like it's all in focus. And these flowers here, this is all broccolini, and these flowers, some of them are in focus and some of them are not, and it just goes to demonstrate how razor thin that focus plane is. This shot here was much better. This was ISO 400, same thing, 1/60. This one came in a little bit more in focus. I would like to see his eye be more in focus here, but at 50% zooming in, it looks relatively sharp here. This is again 1/60. I really wish when I was shooting these I had dialed up a faster shutter speed. I don't know why I didn't do that, but again, you get out there and you start shooting and you forget to update your settings. This shot I really like. This was tomatoes that are in my garden, and the sun was setting. It was the end of the day and it's backlit, and it really illustrates how beautifully it captured all the little hairs on the tomato plant with that backlighting. This was at 1/60 as well, ISO 400, but I definitely really like the way that this one turned out. It's just very pretty, and even looking in, you can see how nice and sharp all of this came out. Happy with that one. This one here is a salvia, and part of the flower is in focus and part is not. It's another demonstration of this area right here is in focus, but this part of the flower out here is out of focus. It's just out of the plane of focus. Here's a bad example of the bee, which was really just completely out of focus here. I'm not sure what I got in focus on this, and looking at it, it doesn't look like very much was really in focus here. Here's an example. This is Henry, my cat. Henry, I was really trying to get his eye to be focused, and this is what I was mentioning earlier about using this lens for portrait photography. It's going to be challenging. I was lucky. I think I got his eye mostly in focus. If I really zoom in, I can see that right here, this pretty much where the focus is. I can see these little hairs right there. But it looks like that was aligning very close to where his eye was, so it looks like his eye is mostly in focus. Backed out a little bit, it definitely looks like it's in focus here. So I was happy with that. That was a 60th of a second as well. I guess I just had left my camera stuck on that. This was a lavender cutting that I was propagating, and it decided to put out a bloom while it was still rooting. And I think this one, I was able to really get some good focus on it. This was really nice. I mean, I was surprised. And I, again, just using the focus peaking. This is a silk flower that's in my office, and I was able to get most of this all in focus with both of these. You can really see the detail here. Nice and sharp and up close. Very nice. Here's a shot of a lens. This is the 80mm macro, and I think this came out really nice. It looks good. Here is a flower that is just getting ready to bloom, agapanthus, and I was really trying to get the tops of these little flower buds in focus. And I could see when I was focus peaking, it was moving up and down the stem, and when it got up to the top, I was able to snap the shot. Same thing here. I was definitely trying to get this all in focus here. I did not get this part here of the flower in focus on that shot. But these are some daylilies that are blooming in the garden right now. I got a really nice shot of this. This is a bud that is on my dahlia that is getting ready to bloom. And I have to say the colors are really nice here. It's a nice dark green. It's very true to what it really looks like outside. And it's a nice macro shot. Here I was focusing on the bench, and this one I was focusing back here on the tomato plants. And this one I was focusing on these agapanthus flowers right here. And so using the focus peaking, you're able to pretty much hone in on the area where you want to focus. So you don't necessarily have to just use this lens for macro. It can certainly be used for all-around shooting. Just like with this. I took this and I was able to, with the focus peaking, just nail the focus here on all of these daylily flowers. This is a really good shot of a honeybee. And this is probably one of the better ones that I got. This is at 1/1100th of a second. And this was handheld and ISO 125. And I really like the way the detail of this one came out. I'm at 200% zooming here, and it's still looking nice and sharp. These are all just out of the camera, raw files. Actually, that one was a JPEG, so is this one. Most of these are all raw files. So this is a bad example of the same thing, trying to get the bee, and totally missed him and didn't get him in focus at all. So it is kind of hit and miss. You do have to really work it and pay attention to the focus peaking. And of course, anytime you've got insects that are moving really quickly, it's going to be a challenge to do. The last thing I just wanted to show you here was on the metadata. So this is what you get. Let's just pick a raw file here. This is what, by putting in the lens name in the settings in the camera like I showed you, this does show up here. And as you can see, it gets all the camera information. It does get the shutter speed, the ISO. Aperture says f/1. Tells me I have no flash, so it does record all of this other information. Focal length, 65 millimeters, that's because I put that in the camera. So I was able to, filtering in Capture One, just say, show me all of the camera lenses that contain Laowa, because I only have one, and I've rated them with 5 stars and says, you know, just show me these. And then I've saved it as a preset, or Laowa favorites. And so as I go through my catalog and I give them 5 stars, these are the ones that I would want to look at or show, then it's able to just filter all of those out for me. So that is why it's really important to put that information in the camera, because you will not be able to find these pictures with the filtering if you don't. So take the time and fill that in on the camera. One other thing I did want to mention is another lens to consider would be the 30mm Fujifilm macro lens. That is $599 USD, and that is close enough in price to the $399 full price for the Laowa 65mm lens. So if you want autofocus and are willing to spend an extra $200, that would be another good option to explore. That's a 1-to-1 magnification though on the 30mm lens, and you would get 2-to-1 macro on the 65mm lens. I chose to get the Laowa lens because I already have the 80mm 1-to-1 macro lens. And for me, this was a better option. I'll leave a link for this if you want to check it out. Maybe you can catch it while it's still on sale. But I definitely think that it is a great little macro lens. I like the fact that it's 2 times, which for the times that you really want to get some good magnification, this would be ideal to use. It'd be a great lens for beginners due to the cost, and I recommend it. I've enjoyed using it. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.